We're still waiting for a few more people to join us. Welcome. For those of you that have come, I'm excited for you to be here for this special guest speaker edition of Spicy Brains Learn Fast with Rachel Radway. But while we're waiting for a few more folks to join that I know said they wanted to be here live, we'd love anybody that wants to, reflect quietly. You can drop it in the chat. You can unmute yourself and share out loud, whatever works for you. But this question that Rachel prepared for everybody while we're letting folks trickle in a little bit. So what do you consider the greatest gift of being wired a little differently? If you feel like it, you're welcome to unmute or to just drop in the chat. I'm with you on that one, Mabel. Sometimes that feels like a gift. Sometimes I'm like, wow, it'd be nice if you noticed that. Kristen, yes, on the systems thinking. It can be really helpful to see how all the pieces fit together. Thank you for sharing those. You're also welcome to share more than one. This is not a, you get to talk once and that's it kind of situation.
Right. And it's not a quiz.
Exactly.
There are no wrong answers.
Yep. No surprise pop quizzes on these learning rides. One of the nice things about being out of formal school is I don't have to grade you. You don't have to be graded. Yay all the way around. What about you, Rachel? What is one of your greatest gifts from your perspective?
Well, I've got a whole slide full of them coming up in the presentation, so I'm going to wait and hear what other people say. Actually, I think there are many, and all of the ones I think that have been mentioned so far are on the slides. So
yeah,
we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I had one of my most proud moments for my ADHD kiddo when he expressed something just like what you did, Kristen, where he's like, he's still in a stage where he doesn't like being neurodivergent, which we're working on, but he did pause and go, I find it easier to be compassionate to other kids than it seems like some of my peers are in middle school. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing that you are realizing that in middle school. That's great.
That is amazing. And yes, Sophie offering different perspectives. Absolutely. And Marianne, yeah, that empathy and understanding what other people are going through. Super important and a really big gift.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, we're a couple minutes in. I know there's some folks that'll be watching the recording afterwards and some who might join a little bit late. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce more formally our amazing guest. Rachel Radway has tons of lovely experience that she'll be telling you about in a moment. But what's most exciting to me is that, like many of us, she's late identified neurodivergent, has really leaned into that in the work that she does and informing with exactly some of those same strengths that you're talking about. And has an award-winning book that came out recently. So she's going to be talking to us today about neurodivergence in leadership and the strengths and challenges in that. And then, as always, we'll have a chance for plenty of Q&A at the end. So with that, I will shut up and turn the show over to you, Rachel.
Sounds great. Thank you, Becca. So hello, as Becca said, I'm Rachel Radway. I am a certified leadership and executive coach. I'm a mentor, speaker, and author, and you can see the book that Becca mentioned there in the corner of the slide. And I help highly sensitive and neurodivergent clients lead with clarity, with confidence, with authenticity, and without burning out, or at least without burning out again, because a lot of us have already been there. And I talk about both highly sensitive and neurodivergent clients. I know Becca has talked before in some of these workshops about labels, and I'm not big on labels. Some of us have diagnoses, some of us don't. High sensitivity is not a diagnosis to have, but there's a lot of overlap. And sometimes I just talk about people who are wired a little differently or have spicy brains. So with that, we'll do it that way. Okay. Forgive me. This is the first time I've done slides in Google Meet. So a little bit more about my background, just really quickly. I did really well in school. I attended great schools. I was in corporate for more than 25 years in a lot of different roles and different industries. I held leadership roles at companies in multiple countries. I served as the board chair of a nonprofit in San Francisco. I have lived altogether in 9 countries and studied 9 languages, although I'm embarrassed to say I really don't speak any of them except for English at this point. And as Becca mentioned, I wrote and published an award-winning book. And I share all of this not to boast, because that's not what this is about. Sounds, though, like a picture of success, right? However, behind the scenes, there was a different story. And I'm sure that some of you can relate to this. I spent decades, especially in the corporate world, faking my way through. And when I say faking it, I don't mean lying about my accomplishments or taking credit for things that weren't mine, but it was more not feeling like I could be my full self wherever I was, especially when I was in leadership roles. And so I was masking, although I didn't realize that I was doing it until very recently when I started learning about all of this. I had anxiety, I had depression, I was misdiagnosed a couple of times. I spent a lot of time feeling just misunderstood, and I dealt with very, very severe burnout more than once. In one case, so severe that I ended up quitting my job, selling my home, and moving to rural Peru to find the time and space that I needed to really start my recovery journey. So I've been through it, like I'm sure some of you have. In 2022, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So pretty late. I was in my 50s. I'm still in my 50s. And it was an interesting experience. I actually went to a practice that specialized in ADHD. Some things didn't resonate, and I had some questions, and I went to see another doctor for another opinion. He spent 5 minutes on the phone with me, and because I had done well in school and hadn't been hyperactive, he decided there was no possible way that I could have ADHD. So class dismissed, and welcome to 1985. Last year, while I was researching for my book, I learned a number of things that kind of turned my world upside down. One of them was how much hormonal changes can exacerbate symptoms that we didn't even know we had, which is a lot of the reason that a lot of women in particular later in life are discovering that they have ADHD, autism, other forms of neurodivergence. And to add to that, I learned that I have some autistic traits as well. So I have not gone through a formal assessment, but what I have learned and all the research I've done has given me permission to self-diagnose as ADHD. Okay. What I want to really talk about are the strengths and struggles. I talk about them as two sides of the same coin. It's very, very human to focus on our challenges and all of the things that have gone wrong. And especially those of us with really deep empathy and who have gone through our lives trying to succeed, we often downplay our own strengths and maybe assume that everybody else can do the same things. We are at our best when we are really focusing on our strengths. So the next couple of slides, I'm just going to go through quickly. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to too many people here. You've already put several of these things in the chat with the question that we started out with. But just to look at the light and the shadow side of some of the things that are, again, two sides of the same coin. So we can have very, very deep empathy. We can also be so empathetic that we go to the other end and we are people pleasers and we can lack boundaries. And I'm going to say can with each one of these because obviously every one of us is different. Every one of us has different strengths and shadow sides. But there are definitely some themes that I see both in me, in all of my clients, and in a lot of people who I talk with who have spicy brains of one variety or another. And yeah, there are a lot. And there are 8 more coming, Sophie, by the way. So finding beauty in small things. We can, look out the window and see birds and appreciate it. We can cry at sunsets and at beautiful art and music. And we can find it harder to regulate our emotions in environments where we might feel like it's inappropriate or we wish we could show up in a stronger way. We connect dots and data, and there are a number of reasons for this that I'll get into in a bit, but we tend to have fewer filters than people with, and I'm going to do the air quotes here, neurotypical brains, because I don't actually believe there's such a thing as a typical brain, but We are downloading and processing more information. We have strong intuition. We may not always listen to it, but we are often able to see several steps ahead by connecting all of those dots and by understanding the ramifications, for example, in strategic thinking, or understanding how a specific kind of decision is going to play out. That can, on the shadow side, leave others behind if we ourselves don't understand what's happening or don't explain our thinking. We can also seem like a know-it-all, and I have a couple of stories to share in a minute. Creative out-of-the-box thinking. This is something that came up in the chat. And on the shadow side, we can perseverate and ruminate and have those thoughts that go around and around and around and around. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Steph. A few more people are recognizing this. So 4 more, I'll go through quickly. Pattern recognition and systems thinking. This was mentioned. Sometimes that, along with the fact that we are processing so much more information, means we can be slower to process. And I've had a lot of brilliant clients say, I always feel like I'm slower than other people. Our brains are working harder. They're doing a lot more. We can be both big picture and detail oriented, which is unusual. Most people lean towards one or the other. On the shadow side, this and a few other things mean that if we're not managing it, because we see all the details and we see how everything can fit together, we can want to control things and we can be very perfectionistic. And I can only imagine, because it drove me crazy putting these slides together, that there are people who are like, oh, those 2 things aren't lined up exactly, especially on the first slide. It literally drove me nuts. And I had to refrain from spending hours and hours and hours on 2 slides. Deep focus and hyper focus. Those can be absolute gifts depending on the situation and what we're working on, what we're doing in general, because it isn't just work. It can also make it harder for us to change gears if something needs to, if we need to pivot or to refocus after a distraction of some kind. The last one that I'm going to focus on today, and Steph, I see you. I'm so glad. Yes, Kristen, there is a huge overlap with trauma, and there are a lot of things in here that are very intertwined, and nothing is an isolated trait here. Values driven. So most of us, if not all of us, are not typically motivated by the things that motivate other people. So some people can go into a job and just work 9 to 5 and leave, and it's all about the money, and then they want to retire and live their life. That typically isn't the scenario for us, which means that we have to sometimes dig harder to find our own motivation. And it can be difficult for our managers if we're in an office environment to understand what motivates us. It also means that we can be extremely sensitive to things like injustice, whether that's in the workplace or in the world in general, and to toxic environments. So the canary in the coal mine scenario, we are often the first ones to react to things that are not going well. And we may leave because we can't deal with it anymore. And we're often validated with that by other people leaving, but it can take a long time for that to happen. So I want to, there we go. I want to illustrate some of these things with 2 quick stories, and then we'll get into what we can do and how we can celebrate and really take advantage of the strengths. The first one is about me. So several years ago, I got 360 feedback, performance feedback from my SVP at work, that people saw me as stomping on their ideas or not being a team player. When I heard this, I was absolutely crushed. I literally cried when I got this feedback. It was so the opposite of what I intended, and I really couldn't understand where the disconnect was. In researching for my book, and partially in reading a book called The Brain of the Highly Sensitive Person, which I highly recommend, I learned a few things. One of the things that I hadn't really put together was highly sensitive people with highly sensitive brains, and there's a huge overlap with high sensitivity and other forms of neurodivergence. we tend to optimize for successful group outcomes. We tend not to be focused on personal or individual agendas. So we're always looking to move the group forward. That, combined with the fact that I was processing a lot more information and I was seeing several steps ahead, meant that in situations where people were coming up with lots of ideas, like a brainstorming session, I would see how certain ideas would not work the way they intended. And I would just kind of push them aside because I wanted to move the group forward to a place where we were focusing on something that would work. The problems, A, I wasn't really conscious that I was doing this. And so B, I wasn't communicating any of this. I can completely understand now how people thought that I was stomping on their ideas. That absolutely must be what it felt like at the time. So although I felt terrible, I was able to give myself grace for that by understanding what was going on. And now I can communicate very differently. I have another story about a startup founder that I worked with. She had a grand vision, that's why she created her business, and she knew exactly what everybody else in the organization should be doing and how they would get to achieve her vision. The problem was nobody wanted to do things her way, and so nothing was moving forward. When we talked, I learned that one of the things she wasn't doing was communicating her vision. She saw it, it was clear as day to her, so she sort of just assumed by moving several steps ahead that everybody else could see it too. She also wasn't communicating how everyone's individual roles fed up into that bigger picture. Again, she saw the whole thing, but not everybody else's brains were working the same way. And also, it was her idea. So if she didn't communicate it, people weren't just going to automatically intuit it, right? The other thing was the perfectionism and the lack of delegating. So because we often have such high standards and we know that we can do things ourselves really well, we often want other people or expect other people to do the things the same way. When she learned to start conveying her expectations and communicating the outcomes that she wanted, and then backing off a little and letting people do the things they wanted their way, she started to see real results. So I'm wondering if any of those stories resonate with anybody. Hands or comments or anything? Awesome. And one of the things that strikes me about this story is looking back in my own history, I have rarely, I mean, as I mentioned, 25 years in corporate, I rarely had bosses whom I thought were fantastic and, great leaders. Thinking back, I would bet that some of those leaders had exactly this challenge, which gives me a lot more empathy for them because they were just like me, right? They just didn't necessarily know how to communicate differently or how differently their brains were working from some of the people surrounding them. So hopefully that can help us give both ourselves a little more grace and also our leaders, and maybe we can communicate differently with them to help them understand. So I don't think anything on this slide is going to be a big surprise to anybody here. These are probably all things that you've heard before, maybe with one exception, which I'll get to. But I want this to be a starting point for our questions. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I really emphasize with all of my clients, leading with our strengths and not trying to just fix the things that we perceive as flaws or that other people tell us are flaws, because that's their perception and it's a lot less important. But there are things here that we may have tried. They work differently for different people. So I'm going to run through them quickly, and then I would love to talk about them and what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what questions you have about how you might be able to do things differently. So with that, lead with empathy. It's such a big strength of ours, and we so often don't give it to ourselves. We are often the hardest on ourselves. We do have high standards. And we want to do everything perfectly, and we want to please everyone. Start with you, give yourself some grace and some self-compassion, and fill yourself up. And that will help make everything easier, I promise. Appreciate the beauty others miss. As I mentioned before, I used to, in my old office, have an avocado tree sitting right outside with all these little birds. I was never a bird person, but I could literally look 2 or 3 feet away and see these tiny little yellow birds and tiny little green birds and big blue birds. It was totally fascinating. And it was an amazing, like, 5-minute break for me in between meetings. Self-care isn't just spa days. I know you know this, but it's still a term that is thrown around a lot. To me, the definition of self-care is listening to all of your needs, and that includes body, mind, spirit, soul, and addressing them in ways that make sense to you. That is taking care of yourself, and that is what is going to enable you to take care of all of the other people or things that you take care of in your life. Trust your intuition, such an important one. We all have it. People whose brains are a little spicier tend to have it more than others for a variety of reasons. And we often trust ourselves less. So I will just say the times in my life where I have made a decision against my intuition, where I've ignored the red flags, or I've gone with my head over my heart or my gut, have been the decisions that I regretted the most. So trust it and then communicate it so other people can be on the same page with you. Ask for what you need. I know this is a hard one, and I could go off on this one for like 20 minutes alone, so I'm not going to, but none of us can do it on our own. And especially today in these crazy times with everything the world is going through, ask for what you need. You might be really surprised by how well people respond. Getting the thoughts out of your head, the perseverating and the ruminating. I'm not going to go into this one in detail either, because there are lots of different ways to do it and different things work for different people. But if anybody has a question, we can talk about it. Delegate, let go of perfection, the B+ rule. Often I find with my clients who are super bright and neurodivergent, their version of a B is often other people's version of an A. So let things go a little bit at a time, where it feels safe, where you feel comfortable doing it, but practice it. Delegate if you can. Let some of the little details go. Let things not line up on the slides, and the sky won't fall. See what happens and practice it a little bit more. Calendar care, super important. Put breaks on your calendar, schedule your lunch hours, put in your boundaries. If you do not start working before 10 a.m., don't let anybody put on anything on your calendar before 10 a.m. Put in your workouts, put in picking up your kids, put in anything else that you need to do that is part of your day and how you need to live your life and to function well. And I know that when you're in a corporate setting, people don't always respect that. I'm laughing at the what's a B. People don't always respect the boundaries on the calendar, but the more you can communicate what's important to you and what you need, the more, when you're in a supportive environment, people will respond to that. And it's a good reminder for us, because often we go, oh yeah, I'll just eat lunch when I have time. No, you need food. Your brain needs fuel. Put it in your calendar and take care of yourself. And I've already said, trust your intuition. It just made a nice neat square of 9. So I put it in again because we often forget to do that. So I do have my contact information here at the end. I can go back to that, but I would love to open it up. And if we want to talk about any of these, how we can work with these, I will just open it up. Anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts?
I think this was amazing, Rachel. There's stuff that I hadn't even realized that I recognized from decades ago or even recently that I had not put 2 and 2 together. So there's some I recognized, and I know I had recognized them in the past, but some were completely new. I would love for you to talk more about the different ways to get the thoughts out of your head. I mean, I know talking to a friend or something like that. But if you have other methods, I would love to hear about them.
Absolutely. And thank you. I'm so glad that this resonated with you, Sophie. In terms of the getting thoughts out of your head, so one that we talk about a lot is just journaling or having a little notebook. I actually keep a tiny little notebook next to my bed with a pen, and getting it onto paper, even more than talking about it, seems to give our brain a signal that, okay, it's taken care of, it's captured. I don't have to focus on it the same way right now. If that doesn't work, there are a couple of other techniques that we can try. One of them is think about the opposite. So if one of the thoughts that's going around and around, say you're replaying a conversation that you had with someone that you don't feel went as well as it could have, or that you wish you had handled differently, look at it from the opposite perspective. Envision in your head a conversation in which it went beautifully and you said everything you wanted to say, and play that out. The act of doing that can sort of give you closure so that you don't keep going around and around and around. Another one is just distract yourself. So do something, get into a game or a book or a song that you really like. It sounds a little too simplistic, but again, it's that, that the hyper focus thing. If we're doing something that we really care about and that does use our brain, we're going to stop focusing on the things that we're going round and round. So I hope those are helpful. Kristen. Oh, sorry. I think two of you. Okay. Kristen, go ahead. And then is that Steph? I'm still getting used to the interface of Meet.
I was just going to comment on what you were saying about getting thoughts out of your head. And something that's really helped for me is just knowing the difference between rumination and then like what I like to call like multi-angle analysis. I've been writing about it for a newsletter that I'm working on, because I think that like overthinking is really pathologized in our culture. And sometimes, of course, it can cause problems, like when people are in distress from rumination that doesn't feel good. But I think more problems are caused by people underthinking and like wet noodle thoughts than people being thoughtful and considerate and looking at things from like multiple angles. So that's something that I kind of do like a check on for myself. Like, am I hurting myself by thinking this? Am I replaying something I can't fix? Is this something I need support on? Or is this just how my brain works? And then it's almost like that second arrow thing that the Buddhists talk about, where I'm causing myself like more pain than the initial wound by, like judging and shaming myself. So I don't know if that's helpful to anyone else, but it's been really helpful to me being like, am I actually hurting myself by being like, or am I just being thoughtful?
Kristen, I love that so much. And you actually reminded me of one of the women that I interviewed for my book. It's actually the SVP that I was talking about before in that little story. She herself is highly sensitive, and she didn't realize it until I interviewed her, because I saw it before she did. One of the things that she says in the book is, I really think that more communications should be planned out beforehand. And you're right that sometimes the overthinking is pathologized when it's really, we're giving more thought to something than other people do. And so much good can come out of that. So I really, really appreciate that. Steph.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for being here, and for Becca for putting this together. This was so enlightening and really, really exciting and validating to have this conversation. So thank you. I very much resonate with all the stories that you shared. And even as I was just thinking that, like, on Tuesday, I did a VIP empowered communications day for a client, and it was really great. And then I told her, I was like, okay, so over the next 5 days, like, I'm going to be delivering the rest of the materials. And because I was so in the zone, I was like up until 4 a.m. working on these materials. and my body was so exhausted, but my brain could not shut down, and it was just like on fire. And I'm a full-time mom right now and running a business on the side, and it's there's no daycare, there's no. So anyway, so some of this is situational because I need to work at that time because I don't have other time right now. But also I do recognize that like I need to sleep, I need to eat. And like when all those things don't happen, that's when my mania sets in. And that's when like, my brain goes into overdrive. And so I don't know. I guess I need the calendar care really resonated. And also like, how do I physically tear myself away when I'm so focused and so enjoying the work, which I rarely get to say right now.
Oh, Steph, I so empathize. Thank you for sharing all of that. I completely empathize with your situation. And it is hard when we have the kids and the job and the other job, which is, our own business. And it's stuff that you deeply care about. I'd love to talk with you about this afterwards, later, maybe we can connect if I can be helpful.
Same. I would love that.
There are ways of pulling ourselves away. And some of it is just figuring out which of your values are the most important at the moment, and how to make decisions that are in alignment with those core values. And I can see that you have several that are all pretty high up there. And sometimes when they compete, it can be hard to kind of manage ourselves effectively. But you also have to keep in mind, you can't run your business, take care of your clients, take care of your kids, do all of that if you're not getting the sleep that you and your brain need, right?
Yeah.
So let's definitely connect and we can talk more.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. I would appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments or challenges or... No? Okay. Well,
what I'm noticing is that I really need to slow down. I mentioned in the chat before, I think some of us who are trainers, educators, teachers, if we are this way, it's hard sometimes to slow down enough and pay enough attention to the early parts of the learning process for our students. And I see this with my book. I'm like, oh, I wrote the book, so everybody now knows what's in the book. I can just talk about it, right? Like, no, I have to go back and start again. And that can be frustrating, right?
It's so interesting that you bring that up, Sophie. A friend of mine who is just publishing a book now called Question to Learn wrote about this yesterday, posted yesterday on LinkedIn about this very thing. And we have to kind of go back to beginner's mind and remember what it was like when we didn't know all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that can be very frustrating, especially when we love to learn new things. We're constantly learning new things. And when we're processing so quickly or just processing so much, it can be hard to feel like we have to go all the way back to that place when we didn't know the thing, right? But it's so eye-opening to learn, as I did with the whole 360 thing. Everybody's brain, as we know, works differently, and people are going to be in different places. And, one of the things I always had trouble with was they say everything 7 times, right? You tell people what you're going to say, and then you describe how you're going to say it, and then you say it, and then you tell them what you said. That always drove me crazy because my brain works really quickly, right? I don't need 17 reminders. Don't send me all your calendar reminders. I've got it. Like all that stuff drives me nuts. And I have clients who absolutely need me to do those things
Yeah.
and need the 7 calendar reminders and the
Most
this.
people do. Yeah.
So it's,
Mm.
I think you said before, Sophie, you know, getting different perspectives, and that is one of our gifts that we can really leverage in this case to, along with our empathy, to understand what other people need and how we can kind of go back and bring that beginner's mind to help them.
Yeah.
Can I throw one more thing in there as someone that also this is now 3 of us here that have published books and yes, are neurospicy and have had that experience. The other thing, plus one to everything that Rachel just said, the other thing that I found really helped me was to move out of the like, a little bit of it was fear of like, well, but you probably already know that because I already not only wrote the book, but I already went on like 17 podcasts and a whole bunch of LinkedIn posts and have like 14 videos on TikTok that are on variations of that. Like, oh my God, I'm going to annoy you by repeating myself. When I focused on particular individual questions that people were bringing up, even if I ended up essentially giving the same answer I had already given those 37 other places, it allowed my curiosity to still be higher and for me to not be afraid that I was annoying someone by being repetitive, right? Because each time it was still the same, like my stuff is focused on motivation. I'm still talking about the ABCDs of motivation every time, but it was contextualized in a different way in relation to, you know, yesterday I was talking to someone and they were asking blah, blah, blah. And then I turned that back into yet another LinkedIn post, right? Like, and it felt a little bit less like, well, of course, everybody knows this already, and now I'm annoying them, and a little bit more like, oh, somebody asked a question, and that means other people probably still have that question. And so it's okay for me to share in a different way, tied to a different story, because then someone else is able to hear it newly, and it allowed me to still be curious, which helped. Because, yeah, when I'm bored, I'm just like, what? Okay, people, we've already said this. Do we really have to say it here? Really? So it doesn't lead to good communication when I'm bored. So I'm sure you all experienced too.
I love that, Becca, and it's so true. And I love that you brought up the curiosity part because we do love to learn, right? And so being curious about how I can reshape something or reframe something and share it with someone else who maybe didn't get it the first time I tried to communicate it, right? So not just people who may never have seen all the podcasts I did or may never have read the book, but clearly something about the way that I just communicated it didn't resonate, didn't, you know, get conveyed. So it's a great learning experience for me, which can keep me engaged. And I did that. I mean, just so you all know, Becca and I talked on Monday, I guess. And I was like, so I don't know this audience. I'm not sure, you know, how basic to go or how in depth to go. And so we talked about it back and forth. There are always going to be people who haven't yet learned some of the things, right? So that can keep us going. I know that Becca, in her series of workshops, offers a chance to ask questions without the recording, which I am happy to do. If anybody has any questions that they don't want included in the recording, we can stop it at any time and address those questions then. So just
so what we can do real quick is that way, so it's in the recording, everybody can see your QR code, your links, and they've been up on the screen for a while. The other thing I'll say, so it's in the recording, and for the people that are here, these are monthly. They're always open to whoever would like to be there. The Spicy Brains Learn Fast series, it's a different topic each month, but if you want to be included on the recurring calendar invite, just give me your email so that I can put you on the recurring monthly meet, and then you can always accept or decline each given month, depending upon whether or not the topic works for you and the schedule works for you. But it's always this time in the middle Thursday of the month.
Thank you.
Just wanted to share that. All right, then I will go ahead. Was there anything else you wanted to get on the recording before I stop the recording?
No, I think we maybe lost Mabel already. I was going to say thank you, but thank you. Sophie put my link in the chat, and no, we're good.
Okay, I will stop the recording.